Okay, let's talk about the essay, critical essay entitled World Englishes. This essay has been written by Andy Kirkpatrick. This critical essay, written by Andy Kirkpatrick, talks about the rise of the world Englishes. Brud's Kachru is a leading figure who developed this new concept of world Englishes. Kachru was an Indian linguist. He had written about world Englishes and Kashmiri languages. He has done a lot of research on world Englishes and Kashmiri languages. Kachru is opposing a British thinker, British linguist, Randolph Quirk. Okay. Quirk demanded for one standard British English that has to be the model for the world. Kachru said, no, there are so many varieties. There are so many varieties of English and they are linguistically equal. Kachru classified Englishes in three circles. It is very much popular as three concentric circles as well. They are inner circle, outer circle, and expanding circle. Okay, the three circles are inner circles, outer circle, and expanding circles. Look at these circles here. Inner circle, US, UK, Canada, New Zealand, Australia. That is where English is spoken as a mother tongue. And another circle is outer circle. This is where English had been introduced as a part of colonial mission or in whatever name, very, very institutionally, almost a kind of official language for this country. For example, Singapore is an English speaking country, Malaysia, India, etc. They had been colonized or there was a kind of institutionalization of English language. And the third circle is expanding circle. That is where English had never been officially enforced. It was never a part of the nation state, right? So look at this figure again. Inner circle, USA, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Outer circle, Bangladesh, Ghana, India, Kenya, Malaysia, Nigeria, Pakistan, Philippines, Singapore, Sri Lanka, Tanzania, Zambia. The expanding circle, China, Nepal, though he has not he has mentioned Nepal, okay, Caribbean countries, Egypt, Israel, Japan, Saudi Arabia, Taiwan, Korea, right? Uh, it even says South Africa, but I'm not very sure about it. Not very sure about South Africa because Kachru also has accepted that these divisions are not watertight and some of them are problematic. Some of the countries may fall sometimes, simultaneously at expanding circle and outer circle. That is possible according to Kachru. Okay, so inner circle, I repeat, here English is the first language of the majority. You see the language of the majority there, for example, USA, Canada. Outer circle, post-colonial nations fall here. English was officially imposed here. Nigeria, Kenya, Singapore, Philippines, India. And expanding circles, English is used here as a foreign language English has not been officially imposed in these countries. For example, China, Nepal, Japan, right? Now let's grasp the history of English language first. Traditionally, English has been classified as English as native language, ENL, English as second language, ESL, English as foreign language, EFL. So this is the traditional classification of English language, right? But Kachru has been proposing a different kind of model here in this essay. Kachru's model is very similar to that model that we just mentioned before. Okay, so but there is a difference, and the difference is Kachru considers different types of English as equal, but the previous traditional model, they give priority to English speaking countries, and they think that whatever they speak, that's the standard, and we all will have to follow that. Okay, but Kachru is not ready to accept that sort of hierarchical classification of the varieties of English language. So Kachru's model is similar to the traditional model, but he does not want to put different varieties of Englishes into hierarchies, right? This is superior, this is inferior kind of thing. There are American varieties of English, there are British varieties of English, there are third world varieties of English. We have a kind of linguistic mosaic. We all know that, right? We all know that. And that there are, in fact, 160 different English dialects spoken throughout the world. 160 different distinct English dialects. So how can you say the way English people speak, that's the standard, that's the only way English has to be spoken? This is what Kachru is asking about, right? And if you go by the number of population, okay, in inner circle, there are only about 375 million population. USA, UK, pure English speaking country population, 375 around. But in outer circle, now you know what outer circle is: India, Pakistan, right? Those Ghana, those countries that are Nigeria, that had been colonized, and their population is approximately 350 to 450 million. An expanding circle, countries like Nepal, China, we also speak English, right? And the number of population, okay, we speak English in these expanding circles, their population is approximately 750 million. Now look, if you combine expanding circle and outer circle, if you just exclude the pure English speaking countries and their population, English speaking population is now, those who are not native English speakers, their population would be approximately more than 10 million. Okay, 10 million non-English speaking non-native English speaking community, approximately 400 million pure, English speaking communities. Now, how can we say, Kachru asks, how can somebody say the way we speak is not correct? And the way they speak English, that is correct. That is what Kachru is proposing here. That is what he is asking here, right? So approximately 10 million people, more than 10 million people, they are not English native speakers, but they speak English just the way we speak English in Nepal, in China, in Japan, and how even in India. And how can they say the way they speak, that's the only way, that's the best way, that's the role model, that's the yardstick? How can they say so? How can they ignore our existence and the existence of those varieties of English language? This is what he is saying in this essay, right? So it's not just a cut through. Okay, we have Manfred Gorlak, okay, Manfred Gorlak. Uh, Similarly, we have, another thinker, um, Tom MacArthur. Okay, we have Paul Stevens. They are also talking about the similar kind of things. Okay, they have contributed on the concept of world Englishes. Okay, they say there are varieties of English, and you cannot say this is superior version, this is inferior version, right? So, in order in the group of those who have been formulating, developing the idea of world Englishes, Kachru is not alone, right? There are other even white thinkers as well. So Paul Stevens is there, Tom MacArthur is there, Manfred is there, right? So, so we have post-colonial varieties of English. You all know that Indian people speak English in their own way, right? So African people speak English in their own way. So we have post-colonial varieties of English. Kachru talks about three stages, right? So when somebody is introduced with the foreign language, he says there take place three different phases in the context of officially imposed English, like India, Kenya. So English had been introduced there in India, and there come three different stages, right? And he says, Katsu says, first stage is local variety of English is rejected. Okay, Indian people were speaking English in their own way. Okay, Hindi English kind of, and those who had very good accent, and even Britishers, Americans, so they were saying, no, no, the way you people are speaking English, that is not correct. You should try to learn our accent, you should try to learn our pronunciations and all those things, and our grammar, right? This is what they were saying. So local variety of English is rejected in the first phase by the majority of the, sorry, by those who know the, who know the English, the way, who can speak English the way, native English speakers speak English. So generally it is rejected, native version is rejected, and it is deemed as inferior, right? Then second stage is, when um, local variety of English is rejected by the population of the same nation. They demand for the standard English, right? This is the first stage. Now you already know. Second stage is local variety as well as imported variety, okay, as well as the foreign variety. They exist side by side. So exported variety is still preferred, okay. If you speak English, why don't you speak English like a Britisher, like an American? This is what they say. But at the same time, they are more or less in the condition to accept the native variety of English as well. This is the second stage. And then we reach to the third stage, and that is Kachru says, that is varieties of English become accepted. All these varieties, so-called standard English, British English, or American English, obviously that is accepted, and the native version, okay, variation of English, that is also equally respected, accepted. In this third phase, generally people don't say, oh, the way you are pronouncing, the way you are speaking English, okay, that is not correct. Generally people don't blame us in the name of accent, right? Because accent, to imitate accent, it is very difficult because of the mother tongue interference, because of other factors as well. So it's very difficult, almost impossible. Either we'll have to be educated by or trained by from a very early childhood by those whites, those natives, or we will have to grow up in the English speaking countries, English as a first language, that sort of countries such as USA, UK, Australia. Otherwise, accent is very difficult, and even native version of English, it distorts some of the grammar. It may distort even the pronunciation. So this is what we call variety. This is what Katsu is talking about. So this model is applicable in inner circle as well as outer circle, he says. So even in inner circle, uh, even in inner circle countries, for example, even in Britain, Great Britain, all of the population, they do not speak English, right? There are other groups of people, other communities who speak their own language, but they are in the English speaking country and official language is English. So even there also, when they come in contact with the English language, the same three stages they go through. First of all, their native, variant, okay, dialect that is rejected for some time. Then after, standard, so-called standard English and their version of English, they go parallel and final, but still there's the kind of discrimination. And finally, and they reach to the third stage when they have gained enough courage to say, after all, this is a matter of tongue, and this is what happens, right? So there are varieties, and varieties of English is possible. So even in inner circle, the same, three different stages model that operates according to the author here in this essay. Okay, and now is the time of first colonial Englishes. You all know that post colonial Englishes. This author, Schneider, he has developed a dynamic model as a framework for post-colonial English. Look what he says. Uh, Schneider says, uh, step one, A is when English is brought to a new land. That is the step one. Then step two is a dominant mother country determines the standard. For example, British English, English from USA. So that is considered as the standard. This is step B. And step C, native variety emerges. Then after some time, native variety, for example, in India, that is what must have happened, right? After some time, native also started speaking English. So native variety emerges. Okay, though elites regent elites, for example, maybe West educated intellectuals in India, still there are that sort of people, to tell you the truth. But in those days, there was much resistance. Even in Nepal, teachers from Darjeeling, they were preferred more as an English teacher. They used to be preferred more as an English teacher, not because they knew so much, not because they were so intelligent, but because they had different tongue. They could probably pronounce English words uh, similar, more or less similar to the real native speakers, right? So we have seen that in the past. Now they are rejected. Now they are not welcome here in Nepal to teach English just because of their accent. Now, knowledge is more important. Methodology is more important. Now we have also probably gone through all the three stages. Now you can easily understand, right? So third stage is native variety emerges. Fourth stage is new variety slowly becomes coded, accepted, and even grammatically accepted. For example, double negation in African context. No, now that is accepted, right? Even in their grammar book. So then fifth stage is all dialectical differences are deemed necessary. They all get space. So they are equally respected, equally honored, because after all, you know, different dialects, different varieties of Englishes may emerge. So languages, after all, means to communicate, right? So these are the five different stages according to you know Sinager, and he's talking about post-colonial nation, especially what happens when a foreign language is introduced or brought into a unique land where the population do not speak that particular language. They have their own language and culture. So this is a beautiful model, right? In examination, you may be asked this question: what are the five different stages that you know Sinader is talking about in the context of post-colonial you know, countries in relation to uh, the development of English language, English language, speaking English languages, right? So so if we try to answer in which stage we are, now this is the problem. For example, in Nepal, in which stage we are, they say, the authors say, you cannot answer that question so easily. Somebody may say we are in third stage, somebody may say we are in fifth stage. So answer may vary because these categories are not so much rigid. they're flexible, right? So if we try to answer in which stage we are, this will be controversial, right? The answer will be controversial, of course. You cannot give the correct answer, one answer. We don't have that sort of thing. Here, the author, Andy says, India has reached fifth stage probably. That is the author's, you know, answer. But he also says you don't need to agree with what he thinks, right? So what this author thinks. So, um, you know, let's go to this slide now because there are examples. If you want to look at these examples, for example, Kirkpatrick, gives an example. The first, the rickshaw driver touting for business. Look at this English, hello, sure, Indian English. Some rickshaw, some bazaar market, some 2 rupees, some go and come back, some silk, some sari. This sort of English, they speak. And second example is butler English. It says butler English, somebody, a servant English. So happy that British came, that very happy madam. Now, no, laughed her. He laughs. On that uh, time, very nice, British time. Money is controlled time. So this sort of English emerges. And third example is taken from a teenage journal. Two rival groups are out to have fun, generally indulge in dhamal and pastime. Dhamal is an Indian word, you all know that. So this is how they mix up, Hindi words and English words, and they create a different kind of, uh, different variety of English. So these examples from different varieties of Indian English. So how local varieties of English became acculturated by local cultures and take on local flavors. So once English is introduced in somebody else's land, what happens? So soon it may adapt the local varieties, the native words may enter into that particular English language that they speak. It happens. For example, if you read novels by Arundhati Roy, you see so many Hindi words that she uses, right? Such as rickshaw, such as lathi, such as kuli, right? And so many words. So it becomes a distinct type of language. So there will be a kind of hybridity. There will be a kind of code mixing, and it happens. This is how language, develops in post-colonial context, or when it travels to another territory and becomes accepted there. This happens. So these varieties are geographically determined as well. For example, the way Indians speak English, the way Nepalese speak English, even we have differences. So the way Africans speak English, obviously there are different. It is geographically determined. They are geographically determined as well. So so these varieties cannot be eradicated, and you cannot have, as much as you try, you cannot have one standard English, one standard yardstick. You cannot have. This is what the post-colonial, English writers, English speakers, they're talking about. They're demanding for, and this model has more or less been already accepted, and now hardly anyone may say you're English, you don't speak English the way a Britisher speaks, or an American speaks. If somebody says so, he or she must be grateful, right? In this post-colonial era. So remember Spivak, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. Remember Indian professors, working in the West. Remember our friends working in the West, Western universities, right? So they have not been able to obliterate their, Nepalese accent. We have seen that, but that's not a problem there, right? That's not a problem there. So we should be understandable. That's the only thing. That's the first thing, right? So because the language is a tool for communication. So language evolves. Language is not fixed. So uh, it's developed among the living people. It's developed among the living culture, as per Kachru, right? So you cannot say this version and in this particular stage, the English language has reached to the maturity. You cannot say this is like a flowing river. How can you take it as something fixed? You cannot do that. So language is a living entity. Language is a living being. So it will have different shape and sizes, right? So just the way as we grow, we gather more mass, more, you know, maybe, you know, we may become taller. So changes come. That is what happens in language as well. So language is a living being. So one nation, one language is not possible. It is not acceptable. Okay, speak English the way Britishers speak. No, this is not possible. Varieties exist. And there is, we have one writer, Pennycook. Pennycook argued for a better understanding of the way different language ideologies construct English locally. So when English came to India, different ideology that existed in India, they were shaping that particular variety of English that Indians had been speaking. So it happens. So people will speak language, and people will use language to communicate certain truths, and truths are embedded in power relationships. So it's all a matter of ideology as well. So all these things are integrated, right? Without understanding all these things, you won't be able to understand, you know what a language is, how it evolves, you know what is the standard, what is not the standard. And it's not possible for you to be able to talk like that. If you think that language is static, your understanding of language is flawed. Okay, this is what Kachru said. So Pennycook argued for local Englishes. Okay, we should also try to understand translingual practices across communities, right? There are translingual, bilingual practices, translingual practice. So that is, see the commonalities in different what does translingual mean? Try to see commonalities between different languages. For example, in English and Hindi, there are the word lathi now, right? So commonality between, in Sanskrit and English, there are so many commonalities. Okay, so this is translingual practices also. So English is transnational, it's translingual, transcultural, right? So it's so many things. So it plays intra and trans social functions. So within the society, within a particular society, it has certain function, and it also has certain functions when we contact interact with someone from another culture. So transcultural social function as well. So the world is being hybrid. The world is being hybrid. This is the post-colonial world. Now the world is shrinking due to the technology. It is being a village, they say. So English is a multilingual language now. Different people who speak different languages, they have accepted English more or less, and they have also started speaking English. So English is not just a language now; it is a multilingual language. So many languages, they have interfered, they have contributed in the shaping or making of English language. So it's a language always in negotiation, right? Always in negotiation. So world Englishes are code mixed varieties now. So Indian English, I told you, Hindi words, English, Nepali English, Chinese English, Chinglish, they say, Japanese English, Jinglish, they say, mixed, code mixed varieties. So language is a part of the larger ecosystem. Language is a part of the language is not independent. It is not, untouched, or it is not, it is not beyond social norms, social values, power relationship that go on in our societies. So all the things are connected with language and the way we speak language, right? So one area to think over is the distinctive stylistic feature of varieties of English. Those who want to study world Englishes, you may focus on how different, uh, how unique kind of a stylistical feature, grammatical feature, phonological feature that is being practiced in that particular you know Hinglish or Chinglish or Jinglish or Nepanglish, they say in Nepal. So this is what they say. World Englishes say believe. So 46 different syntactic features, you know, of varieties of world English have been provided by Courtman. Look at this man, Kortman, and Courtman. He has compiled approximately 46 different varieties of world Englishes. But I told you, if you go to other sources, they say 160 different English dialects have been already recorded. So Courtman said there are at least 46 different varieties of English. Okay. So, and all of them are acceptable. right? It does not mean, for example, the way Chinese people speak English, the way Indian people speak English, when they come in contact with each other, it may be difficult for them to communicate. It happens, but that does not mean they should stop, speaking their own version of English, right? This is what the world English believes, you know. So yeah, pronunciation should be correct, but accent, you cannot completely, obliterate or destroy the accent and learn somebody else's tongue or accent. This is what world English believes. So, uh, so linguists are also studying about distinctive pragmatic features of the varieties. Pragmatics is a field of linguistics. Pragmatics, phonology, semantics, all this. So we need to study all these varieties and their grammar, their structure. This is a new area for research. uh, Sharifian, writes, I quote, different varieties embody cultural conceptualizations of their speakers. So language variety also relates itself to culture of that particular place, of that particular geography. So language and culture are connected, right? So for Nepali language and Nepali culture, they are connected. For example, patriarchal culture and the language that we are speaking now, if you try to read these two things in connection, you will come to know the language that we're speaking is very, very patriarchal. It gives all negative attributes to women, feminine words, and all positive attributes to men, masculine words. Obviously, language and culture are so much interconnected. Just consider, think about that particular example that I just before mentioned. Okay, so as a speaker of local varieties of English, we need to be sensitive to cultural issues as well. So because language and culture are connected. If you are not aware of cultural issues, you will not be probably able to do justice to that particular variety of English that you are speaking. Okay, so speakers of inner circle varieties should be more careful to how this language is being used in other cultures and contexts. For example, a Britisher comes and English language, it's something that they gave to us, but the way we are using English language here, the kind of vocabulary English language has already gathered here in our context, and they cannot say, okay, they cannot just assume whatever the way we speak they'll be able to understand. Many writers in the West have said the way Spivak writes English they cannot understand. The way Spivak speaks Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak English they hardly can understand. Many white thinkers have accepted that fact, but they cannot say Spivak is wrong. They cannot say, because it's all about culture as well. Language and culture are interrelated. So what should they do? They should be aware of our culture if they want to talk to us. Okay, they should be sensitive to our culture and the varieties. Okay, these differences. If they really want to understand us, on their part, they want to do nothing, and on our part, we'll have to correct everything, and we'll have to become like them. This is not that sort of colonial world anymore. Okay, we are not going to accept that sort of imposition anymore. Now this is a democratic world, more or less. This is what the authors here, they're hinting at. Okay, so literature of new English is also, they are emerging. Indian English and literature written in Indian English, they're also there. These are new fields of study. They acknowledge cultural differences. For example, a Pak novelist, Pakistani novelist, Sidhwa writes, we have subjugated, beaten up, and the colonizers' language and made it our own. Look, so this Pakistani writer is saying, uh, English language is the colonizers' language, but we have destroyed, distorted, we have subjugated, we have made it our own. We have done so many things and we have made it our own. We have customized it as per our situation and need. This is what he says. So this is the nature of English language spoken in Pakistan, in India, in China, in Nepal. So Ole Soyinka, Ole Soyinka is a very famous writer. Ole Soyinka also writes, we must reassemble it in our own way. Okay, fine, colonizers taught us English language, but we should not take it as they taught us. We should not speak. There is no need to speak English the way they want us to speak. Even Ole Soyinka said, he's a very famous writer. So, but some scholars don't like this idea of using colonizers language, and there are some speakers, some scholars in this part of the world who say, don't use colonizers language, don't write in English language because this is oppressors language. There are some people who talk like that also, and obviously there are some people who say, if you want to use English the way they use it, don't use English the way you want to use it. That sort of people are also there, but they're in minority now, and they and hardly can defend their position now. So and don't use English language. These scholars, the thinkers, are also in minority, and they hardly can defend their position. It's very difficult not to speak English language now, especially in the context of India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. And how can they avoid speaking English? Can you even imagine that? Because that's their official language. Some of the Indians, they do not know any other language except English language. So how can they go away from English language? So that's another reality, postmodern reality. So you know, so poet Lakdasa Wickramasinghe, must be Sri Lankan or something, right? She had written, I'm writing in the language of most despicable and loathsome people on earth. Look how much hatred she has. She's using English language, but she calls English people the most loathsome, hateful, despicable people in the on the earth. But I'm using their language, she said. So that sort of hatred is there regarding English language in post-colonial world because of the brutality, because of the injustice that they hurled upon us during the colonial era, right? So the debate is there. So Desai writes, English today is as much Africanized as it is British or American. What a beautiful sentence. English today is as much African as it is British or American. So African English is also equally valid, it has to be equally respected. This is what. So there are, of course, fierce debate about this anyway, okay? But more or less, this world English, this idea has been established now, right, in post-colonial world. So Kachru also didn't take his circle as final and absolute. He does not say those three circles and they're the absolute thing, and there may be no fourth circle. He cannot say so. Okay. So if we try to demarcate, this is where this country may fall. Uh, this is what it is. If you try to think like that, that may be problematic. For example, in expanding circles such as China, Korea, Japan, role of English is dramatically increasing now. For example, the way we speak English in Nepal and the way they are speaking English in India, how much difference do you see? Do you think Nepalese people are far weaker in the matter of speaking English now compared to Indian? Fine, many people may be able to speak English in India, but the way they speak English, the way educated Nepali citizens these days, they have started speaking English. So there is a history of the role of institutionalization, and we have been doing it on our own, right? It's out of choice, but still, you know we are not lagging that much behind. So this is the thing. So how can you separate now Nepal and India in the way they are speaking English language, the kind of proficiency that they have developed? It's very difficult to say. So so look, number of the non-native speakers of English now outnumbers native speakers of English. I just mentioned in the beginning as well. For example, Chinese English has distinct features, and it's so difficult to understand the way Chinese people speak English. In the Chinese media, fine. In the world level, top-notch intellectuals, so those who are educated in the West, some of the Chinese may speak well. But for example, I had been in China for more than 2 years as an English teacher. I know it's very difficult for us to understand the way Chinese people speak English. Even their PhDs in English as English major, they are very difficult to understand because of the accent. But once you start having a conversation with them, once you start living with them, you'll soon understand that variety, and you'll be able to understand that variety as well. Right? This is what happens, and they also will be able to understand our variety of English as well. So uh, this is what the concept of world English is all about. You need to put effort if you want to talk to someone who belongs to another culture, another community. Maybe they may have different accent, they may have different version of English. So you cannot say you need to speak like me, the way I speak. That this is not the word. Okay, we're in 21st century and you cannot say so. So now there is a question, which English to be adopted? That's the question that Kachru asks. Asian English is post-imperial, post-anglophone, for example, Chinese English. Now this is another variety. Look, in Asian English, Chinese variety is they had never been colonized. For example, Nepalese variety, we had never been colonized. So what is our variety of English? It is, the writers calls it post-imperial variety of English or post-anglophonic variety of English. So do you accept this version or not? Or who are you not to accept this version because this exists? So many people are speaking. So these are the questions. So what are the features of future directions now? Okay. Now this is the last slide probably. What are the future directions? So future direction is there has been a significant shift. English has become a lingua franca. English is expanding from inner to outer circles. Okay. It's a dynamic, language is always dynamic, growing, changing. So now we have varieties of Englishes. Now we have multitude of different varieties of Englishes. We have hybridity now. Now the question is, will we be able to understand each other in so many varieties? For example, when we encounter a Chinese, will we be able to understand the way Chinese speaks English? So that's the question. That's the vexing question now. But we don't have answer. What to do? What to do? In the name of being understandable to people from other culture, can we develop new kind of English? Can we go against us? Can we go against our culture? Can we go against our soil? Because just previously they had mentioned, it is related to geography. Language is related to geography as well, culture as well. Okay, all those things, power relationship, all those things. So language is so specific. It's not just language. So many things come here. So just because you want to be understandable to someone from another culture, do you think you will be able to understand or learn the way they speak? So is it possible? If you are speaking to British, follow their accent. If you are speaking to American, follow American accent. If you are speaking to Brazilian, follow Brazilian accent. Is it possible? So these are the problems. But Smith, we have Smith here. Smith says, be intelligible uh, to who you are talking to. Try to do that. Speak slow if you're talking to foreigners, maybe. Or try to be intelligible, pronounce correctly, right? That is the maximum that you can do. So if possible, whatever you do, try to be intelligible. You try. And they will also have to try to understand what you are talking about because it's their duty as well. It's not just your responsibility. So that's the only thing that we can do, Smith writes. So this is the world of world Englishes. This is the new age. And there is not one standard English now. There are different, versions. There are different dialects. So this is it. This is the essay in entirety. Thank you very much for listening.